E aí, pessoal, tudo bem com vocês? Bom, estamos de volta aqui com mais um vídeo de Garry's Adventure, né? E como vocês sabem, nós temos aqui, né, esse vídeo da Red Shoes Betrayal, né? Que foi um vídeo que foi recomendado por um dos meus inscritos aí em live, né? Foi o Ed. E ele recomendou aqui, né, pra que a gente assistisse e ver o que esse carinha aqui, né, o cara desse canal, o que ele reuniu de informação pra poder provar que a Red Shoes é, na verdade, a responsável pela corrupção aí da Cinderela, beleza? Então, vamos fazer aqui o react rapidinho desse vídeo, né? Vou deixar ele aqui com a legenda gerada, né, de inglês para português, mas eu vou estar traduzindo alguns pedaços aí para vocês, caso não tenha tradução, beleza? Então vamos lá, né? Pelo que eu vi também, ele lançou uma outra parte dessa teoria aqui. Vamos dar uma olhada também nela e ver o que se trata. Espero que não tenha spoilers aí da parte 2 do evento, porque eu já vi que tem gente postando aí na internet, né, a animação final aí da parte 2 do evento de Old Tales, e eu estou me esquivando. Então se você já viu, né, não comenta sobre isso aí nos comentários desse vídeo, porque eu estou evitando spoilers até a hora da live, beleza, pessoal? Então, bora lá.
What would you do if you found yourself trapped, unable to move? This reality is one that Cinderella found herself in during the first part of Old Tale's story. Our understanding of corruption, how it works, and how it is manipulated has also been hidden in plain sight. Within the event map, main story, and most of all, the minigame, we find information that we can slowly piece together. Countless mysteries still remain about Cinderella's corruption, and initially, I approached the possibility that one of her very own members was guilty. Today, I intend to double down on this notion, provide evidence and reasoning on how I came to this conclusion. This will be recorded all before the events of part 2, when this theory will either go up in flames or prove to be true. So today, join me as we comb through all the information we have, all the hints we are given, and all the signs that point to Red Shoes. In order to lay the groundwork for this theory, we need to first address Red Shoes herself. Red Shoes is a member of Old Tales, the second-generation Grimm's model to succeed Goddess, to aid in the fight to take back the surface. Prior to this, Red Shoes, much like Abe, was a great researcher and figurehead in the VTC, the conglomerate working alongside the United Forces of Humanity. Abe, through part 1, is also revealed to be the one who built Old Tales by her own hand. It is also revealed that Red Shoes has similar, or even greater knowledge and understanding than the research Abe had conducted. This is where our first interaction.
Aqui ele traduziu a Abe pra macaco, tá, gente? Aqui ele entendeu, a IA do YouTube entendeu aqui Abe como ape, né? Então, traduziu aqui errado pra macaco, né? Então, algumas coisas aqui vão ser traduzidas erradas, tá, pessoal? Mas eu vou colocando aqui em pauta, né, o que foi discutido pelo vídeo, tá?
Of the main story occurs, and where the seeds of doubt are planted with Red Shoes.
Okay.
Why did you apply to be a candidate?
Okay.
Me? I wanted to become famous, and I desired power.
That's surprising to hear.
Okay.
I realize it may sound absurd for a top researcher at VTC and high-ranking priest to say this, but those are indeed my true intentions. Only by moving my way up the corridors of power will I be able to acquire the knowledge I desire and accomplish what I wish to achieve. There is something I'm after, and in order to make it a reality, I require both power and knowledge of these secrets which currently elude me.
What is that?
To unify everything.
To unify everything, not everyone. To gain knowledge and power to achieve this goal. These are the wishes of Red Shoes, and the methods she uses in order to obtain such greatness are nothing short of disturbing. On the eve of deployment for Cinderella's joint mission with Goddess, Red Shoes sits down and shares a cup of tea with Cinderella. The following morning, after conducting maintenance on Cinderella alongside Abe, the massacre of the Elysian lab occurs. Originally, all signs pointed to either Abe or Red Shoes being the culprit. Despite this, the map itself points to the real traitor. Following the completion of Story 1-5, we see another portion of the map open up. The scenery turns from a brilliant blue to a vibrant red. Above the goddesses, we see another person, the only member of Old Tales represented in this liminal space, Red Shoes. In addition, for the next 5 days, relics regarding corruption would appear exclusively near Red Shoes herself.
Eu falei isso em live, gente. Eu falei que todos os arquivos de corrupção estavam de fato aparecendo do lado da Red Shoes, cara. Tudo, cara. Tava tudo aparecendo do lado dela. Interessante, né?
These relics speak of the progress in which humanity took to discover and study corruption, and ultimately uncovering the fact that it could be manipulated. On the final day of the corruption report, one interesting thing is also unearthed. It has been confirmed that corruption forcibly issues a command to Nymph. What we are seeing is not paralysis, but rather a command to seize all actions, a kill switch. There also appears to be a partial connection to verbal commands. While it may be possible to implant other types of override commands, at this point in time, we have not seen any cases exhibiting anything other than disruptions of physical actions. Further tracking for additional cases is necessary. So far, the only cases discovered are related to the seizing of physical commands. Numerous antidotes and vaccine programs have been attempted to treat the corruption, but none have proven effective.
Verdade.
Fortunately, thanks to NIMH's natural defense capabilities, the invasive bodies cease their activity within a short period. Since there are still many things about NIMH itself which remain unclear, proactive treatment is currently impossible. Until we know more about NIMH, any research on the treatment of corruption will be temporarily halted. But
É que aquela coisa, né? A Red Hood, né? Ela foi corrompida também, mas ela tinha, né? Um certo controle da corrupção, né? Não foi que era um controle, mas ela meio que conseguiu resistir mais tempo que a maioria das Nikes, né? Com a corrupção. Então ninguém sabe o que de fato aconteceu com a Red Hood aí pra isso, né? Se foi o NIMP dela que tava meio que defeituoso, ou se ela meio que perdeu o NIMP também pra poder suportar a corrupção, não sei. Mas ela conseguiu, né? Ela conseguiu resistir mais tempo antes dela resolver se entregar pra corrupção. E ficar todo esse tempo desativada que ela ficou, até ela encontrar com a Rap, né? Então vamos lá, vamos continuar aqui.
There's just one problem. Why is there one missing report bridging the gap between understanding corruption and manipulating it? This is one of the first instances of a sequential set of relics missing in entry. But the question remains as to the connection between Red Shoes and these notes. Approaching Red Shoes in the event map yields one phrase to be uttered by Cinderella. Red Shoes, how could you?
Como você pôde, né? Como pôde, né?
In addition to the glaring amount of suspicion pointed at Red Shoes, there's also the minigame's information that we have to take a look at too.
Eu tava lendo algum desses files aqui, viu, gente? Inclusive eu encontrei 3 files no jogo, né? Que eu fiz joguei um pouquinho ontem. E eu tenho 3 files aí que eu preciso ler pra vocês na próxima live que eu for jogar aqui do Old Tales, tá? Eu já até marquei os nomes quais são pra poder ler certinho pra vocês na ordem.
Into the mirror follows Cinderella on her journey through corruption, the skewed image she sees when conducting heinous acts in the name of the Queen. Through this minigame, the player has the opportunity to collect currency in order to unlock various improvements to Cinderella's combat ability. There's also the option to purchase these sets of collectibles that reveal a bit more to the story. Some of these are recollection of Nikes who become corrupted. Some describe journals from Abe when repairing Old Tales, but one describes something completely different. There's more to this place than we initially thought. The voice we heard belongs to a Nike. There is a Nike here with her head exposed, as if she's undergone some kind of brain surgery. Not just her, many other Nike show signs of similar surgical procedures. It's a horrific sight. The strange part is that all of their eyes have turned red. What kind of experiments were they conducting here? The mechanical sounds we heard outside were indeed from raptures. The raptures have had their
Aqui tá trazendo raptures como êxtases, tá?
armaments removed, rendering them immobile. Notably, they have all been corrupted. What was the person running this place trying to do? Were they experimenting with corruption on the Nikkes? I'll continue to search for clues about who's behind this horror show.
Então nós temos um arquivo aí que fala disso. Eu não li esse arquivo no jogo, hein? Acho que eu tenho que comprar, né? Alguns arquivos aí você pode comprar. Então acho que eu vou comprar um desses arquivos na próxima vez que eu for fazer live do minigame aqui, beleza?
I've found something that may lead to who's behind all of this. It's a report on VTC's corruption research. The person in charge is listed as Red Shoes.
Aqui já entregou ela já.
Not only was Red Shoes a researcher for VTC, but she was also the lead figurehead in the study of corruption. In previous entries, Abe also describes herself as being not as versed in corruption as Red Shoes is. At the moment, we don't have access to the other 3 files leading up to this discovery, locked by part 2 of the story being unreleased at this time. Despite this, it paints a rather gruesome picture. Red Shoes, at some point, had tinkered with manipulating corruption in order to control it to a certain degree. As we know from Nikke's main story, corruption is most similar to that of a line of code implanted into a Nikke's nymph. This code hijacks a Nikke entirely, overriding its original derivatives, replacing it with the will of the caster, or in this case, the queen. In Red Shoes' case though, I feel she did this in order to gain power of her own, or to completely shatter Cinderella's chances of achieving what she could not. Exploring the map of Old Tales and navigating to this specific tab, we can see a preview for the splash art of part 2 of Old Tales' story. In part 1, we see afflicted areas represented by shattered glass, fragments of where Cinderella had injured Old Tales. In part 2, we see all but one member whole. That member being our suspect.
Nossa, pior que tem uma rachada na cara da Red Shoes ali, né? Uma rachadura.
Red Shoes. The suspicion around Red Shoes is more than mere speculation, and the evidence is irrefutable to not say that she's a suspect, at the very least. A traitor amidst the ranks of humanity's strongest. Until part 2 rolls around, this is about all we can infer from the story thus far. What are your theories on Red Shoes? Let me know in the comment section down below. Wednesday is the next installment of this story, and I can't wait to cover it with all of you. Thank you all for joining me, and I will see you all in the next video.
Caramba, e aqui, como vocês puderem ver aqui, ele cobriu todas as partes do jogo, né? Tá mostrando aqui que tem arquivos dentro do minigame que indicam que de fato foi a Red Shoes que fez a corrupção na Cinderela, né? Esses arquivos que ele mostrou aqui eu acabei não lendo, né? Até porque eu priorizei comprar mais os upgrades da Cinderela do que comprar os files que tinham ali pra comprar. Mas eu andei vasculhando o mapa ali nas regiões que eu queria ter entrado antes e não podia, né? E até dominei algumas certas áreas do mapa aí, né? E eu consegui pegar mais alguns files aí que falam, né, que documentam, né, a criação da Cinderela pela Abe, né, mas pelo visto eu tenho que comprar esses outros files aí que estão disponíveis na loja pra gente poder ter acesso a mais sobre o estudo da corrupção das Nikkes, tá? Eu vou fazer isso na próxima live do Old Tales com certeza, ok? Beleza. Muito bom o vídeo do cara aqui, né? Cobre todas as partes aqui, né, tudo cirúrgico aqui o vídeo do cara, né? Ele fez tudo certinho. Né, ele pegou todas as partes aqui que apontam diretamente para Red Shoes. E como eu falei para vocês, tem um outro vídeo que ele fez, né, que também aqui, ó, Red Shoes é a rainha da corrupção, né? Ele acabou de lançar esse vídeo aqui, acho que não tem nem uma hora que ele lançou, ó. É mais de uma hora que ele lançou, né? Então vamos lá, vamos ver qual que é o final aqui da teoria dele, né? Vamos embora lá. Vou botar as legendas aqui, já vamos fazer react dessa segunda parte também.
The wind blows through a desolate wasteland. Everything is still. No cars, no planes, and most notably, no people. It has been this way for over a century. The only sound filling this empty void being that of mechanical monsters. Monsters who drove humanity underground after a devastating loss of power. Ultimately, one thing proves to be clear. The root of this reality. One event caused all of this.
Okay.
Old Tales didn't just leave us with a prime suspect, but also gave us a source to decades of turmoil. Red Shoes had not simply studied corruption, nor did she merely find a cure for it. Instead, she decided to go a step further. We know from Rapunzel's new Bond story that corruption wasn't originally something that caused Nikes to go haywire.
E lembrando que eu tenho que fazer, né, o bonde aqui da Rapunzel, né? Vocês pediram pra eu fazer o vídeo dela, então ele cobriu o bonde da Rapunzel aqui. Então vai ser meio que um pequeno spoiler também, viu, gente? Mas não se preocupe que eu vou fazer o vídeo ainda pra vocês.
Over time, prior to Red Hood's corruption, Nikes displayed a shift when corrupted. They began acting irregularly, turning their guns on their allies. In order to further understand this corruption, Rapunzel makes haste to an Elysian lab, seeking out two people to assist her, Abe and Red Shoes. This, to our knowledge, is the first instance of corruption resulting in collateral damage. It wasn't simply a form of paralysis anymore, but instead was a direct hindrance to the fight against the Raptures. Corruption would lead Nikes to snap, the only solution to terminate the infected. Both Abe and Red Shoes seem puzzled by this revelation. However, the words of Red Shoes still echo in the back of my mind. To achieve power and knowledge, to unify everything. As I've stated previously, corruption is closely related to lines of code, and that code can be manipulated.
Então, no caso, né, que nem ele falou aqui, né, que a corrupção é uma linha de código inserida dentro né, da programação da Nikki, né, tipo assim, dentro do cérebro, no caso é um NIMP delas, né. Então, tipo assim, é um vírus, né, é um vírus que eles não sabem como deletar, como combater. No caso, a Red Shoes pode até saber como fazer essa contramedida, mas obviamente ela não vai revelar tão cedo, né.
Red Shoes could have easily altered this code, and through research conducted in secret, developed a way to control it. One thing that always puzzled me was the motive behind Red Shoes' corruption of Cinderella. Did she do it purposefully? If so, why would she execute a plan that would almost spell certain death for herself? Was it a gamble? Did she anticipate this? Or did she perhaps find a way to influence the corruption to ensure her own survival? I think this is a possibility. But there is another option. There's something I need to show you.
Vamos ver.
Her eyes appear to be orange, an amber color. So then why do her eyes turn red? Red
Pior, né, cara? Pior que eu nem reparei nesse detalhe dos olhos dela, mano.
eyes, at this point in the story, are associated with the changing string of corruption, and it just so happens that both Cinderella and Red Shoes have it. There is a possibility that Red Shoes, in her own pursuit of knowledge, experimented on herself. The result? A slow creeping of corruption until she could no longer operate on her own will. Alternatively, she'd implanted the corruption within herself and Cinderella as a limit breaker, the result being catastrophic and something Red Shoes could not predict entirely. Accidental or intentional, one thing remains clear. Red Shoes has set the groundwork for corruption to be implanted in Nikes. The phrase Rapture Queen has always been one used in Nikke's story. However, in Red Shoes' case, I feel her definition would be different. She wasn't a queen in the literal sense. Instead, a progenitor of corruption. Corruption, to this day, is used as a bargaining chip in the hands of humanity's enemy, all thanks to Red Shoes.
Caraca, velho.
Or is this all a red herring? It's obvious that all signs are pointing to Red Shoes, but even with insurmountable evidence against her, one thing never sat right with me. Why execute a plan like this that would almost result in her certain death?
É, que ela quase se matou nessa loucura dela, né?
Even with Red Shoes seeking power, this seems like an extreme. Once more, we venture to the minigame in the mirror, where we find these, the fourth and final droplet in an unreleased area dubbed as Where the Horizon Meets.
I should have believed Cinderella. Even with red eyes, she's still herself. I'm sorry, Cinderella. I'm so sorry.
Eu não achei esse file aqui.
I also wanted to tell you something. You're not a monster. You're not Anichiro. Abe was right. You're still Cinderella. I'm sorry. Sorry for being scared. Sorry for not delivering the message.
Okay.
I was scared because it felt like my comrades were leaving one by one. I was scared of Anichiro. Be that as it may, I'm sorry for leaving you alone, for not believing in you.
Caraca, velho. Onde que tá esse file? Eu quero pegar esse file.
Cinderella, my precious friend. No matter what tries to besmirch you, you're still you. The glass slippers won't be tainted. Neither will you. You're still you. You're my friend and you shine ever so bright.
Não considero essa atitude de um amigo não, hein?
You've been through so much sadness. So, I hope that only joy comes your way from now on. I hope you can only think of happy things. If Anichiro tries to take you again, or if it tries to hinder your happiness, then I'll save you. No matter what you look like, I'll believe in you. No matter what's on your hands, I'll hold them. I'll make sure you are happy.
So what does this exactly mean?
Não sei.
On one hand,
Ele perguntou, o que será que isso significa? Não tenho certeza.
this could be grave post-mind switch. However, I feel like this is the true words of Red Shoes. Through
Okay.
these set of notes, it would appear that Red Shoes feared the fragmenting of her squad above all else. Let me present an alternative timeline, one which doesn't paint Red Shoes as the sole antagonist. What
Okay.
if, in order to create these Nikkes, Abe had tampered with the combination of Nikke and Rapture technology? Both tech is fairly similar, so it's entirely possible that to achieve such greatness, sacrifices were made. What if Red Shoe's research wasn't to push her own agenda, but was to save her squad? What if she knew of her own corruption and the corruption code present in all the members of Old Tales? The previous notion of her red eyes seems more tragic in this sense, and would also explain this scene perfectly.
There will be additional inspections, including a brain scan. This process is still in the developmental stages, but they say it can reveal almost everything about a Nikke.
Ok.
If you pass that test, then you will be allowed to remain a second-generation Grimm's model.
Brain scan? I heard you need to open up the brain for that.
É, ela foi bem específica sobre esse pedaço aqui, né? De ter que abrir o cérebro, né? Até porque, que nem se mostrou nos files do outro vídeo lá, né? Eles estavam conduzindo experimentos em níqueis, né? Que estavam com seus cérebros expostos na mesa de operação.
That's a rumor. It's not that primitive.
Aí, obviamente, o outro ali vai lá, né? O Oswald vai lá e, não, isso é um rumor, cara. Não é tão primitivo assim. Então, vocês tentando, né, por debaixo dos panos, como é que é o procedimento aí.
I saw the official documents from VTC.
I'm telling you, that's not how the procedure works.
Aí a argumentação entre eles continua. Não, eu já vi os documentos oficiais. Não, isso não é assim que funciona.
I also read that 90% of Nikkeis who underwent that procedure died on the table.
Where are these supposed documents you speak of?
Aí o cara fala, peraí, você tá sabendo demais. Ele já sacou que a mulher sabe de muita coisa, né? Foi, onde estão esses documentos, então? Me mostra essa papelada aí que eu quero ver.
No such paperwork exists.
We think that you're lying.
To hide her research and the reveal of presence of corruption, Red Shoes fabricated a mortality rate to Oswald. She did this in order to prevent herself and her allies from being scrapped. At this point in the story, that was a direct order. Any Nikkeis exhibiting signs of the new strain of corruption were said to be terminated. Perhaps Red Shoes caught this corruption first and noticed it, and much like Red Hood, for a short time, was able to suppress it. This would explain the worry she had when Rapunzel brought the Nikke to the lab in her Bond story. It showed evidence of corruption advancing, meaning Red Shoes had to find a way to revert it. Her research was to aid, not to harm. But regardless, that research eventually ended up in the wrong hands. But these are merely my theories. Old Tales Part 2 releases soon, and I wait with anticipation for all to be revealed. What are your thoughts on this topic? Be sure to let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you all for joining me, and as always, I will see you all in the next video. Janet.
Olha, interessante, hein, cara? Esse vídeo aqui ficou muito... aqui ele tentou pintar um pouco mais como a Red Shoes, tentando mostrar um motivo dela ter feito tudo isso, né? A razão dela ter... ela não queria que o grupo dela se separasse, ou então talvez ela queria garantir que ela fosse a primeira a ser escolhida para trabalhar com as deusas. Tudo indica que tem um propósito sombrio nessa trama toda, né? Por quê? Que ele falou que ela, como já foi mencionado, ela era uma das pesquisadoras aí do VTC que trabalhava com a corrupção. Ela sabe como é que funciona o procedimento do scan cerebral, até porque tem que abrir a cabeça da Nick, deixar exposto na mesa, para eles poderem fazer toda a leitura e tudo mais. Isso pode acabar... Aqui ele falou que ela inventou uma taxa de mortalidade, mas eu acredito que não foi uma invenção. Eu acredito que realmente, durante todos os processos que ela deve ter feito, deve ter causado a morte de inúmeras Nickes aí, né? E se ela foi de fato ou não corrompida, não tem como saber ainda, mas ele apontou por um detalhe que eu não percebi, acredito que muitos também não tenham percebido, que os olhos da Red Shoes estavam vermelhos no momento que ela confronta a Cinderela no finalzinho ali da parte 1, né? Bom, o jogo neste momento já está em manutenção, né? Então... não sei se vocês já fizeram as suas diárias, até esqueci de fazer uma publicação pedindo para vocês fazerem suas diárias antes da manutenção, mas não se preocupem, tá? A gente vai ter a live hoje, eu vou tirar em uma conta só, tá? Uma pessoa só pediu para eu tirar na conta dela, então eu vou fazer as invocações da Grave, né? Vou dar uma testada rápida na Grave e aí a gente já pula direto para a parte 2 da história, pra gente poder finalizar aí e então ver como que se encerra esse Old Tales e qual que será a conclusão aí da Cinderela e da Red Shoes, beleza? Gostei muito do vídeo aqui, vou estar deixando ambos os links na descrição do vídeo, né? Se vocês forem assistir também, dá uma passada aqui no canal do rapaz aqui, dá um like pra ele, né? Curte o vídeo dele aí também, pra ajudar no crescimento dele. Foi muito bem feito esse vídeo aqui, esse documentário que ele fez aqui sobre a corrupção das Nickes, né? Da Cinderela principalmente, e de toda essa trama em volta da Red Shoes, né? E eu quero saber se vocês gostaram, né? Deixem nos comentários do vídeo o que vocês acharam, quais são suas teorias, se vocês têm alguma ideia diferente do porquê ela pode ter feito isso, ou se ela não é de fato aí, né, a responsável pela corrupção. Vai que no final das contas a Red Shoes é uma inocente também, não tem como saber ainda, né? Mas tudo indica que, né, todas as pistas que temos apontam diretamente aí para Red Shoes como a principal responsável. Foi o chazinho ou foi a injeção que elas deram lá durante a manutenção da Cinderela antes dela ser disponibilizada lá para as deusas, né? Bom, deixa nos comentários que eu tô curioso para saber aí o que vocês acham a respeito dessa história. Já aproveita, se inscreve no canal, ativa o sininho e compartilha com os amigos e fãs aí de Garras of Icturnix, beleza, pessoal? Então nos vemos na próxima e falou!